The heat licked at Sergeant Miller's face, a raw, primal warmth that mirrored the ache in his chest. The flames, hungry and bright, consumed the splintered wood and forgotten things, a fiery pyre against the deepening twilight. In front of it, propped on a makeshift stand, was the portrait. A younger Miller, crisper uniform, eyes that held a spark the fire couldn't quite extinguish. He hated bonfires, Private Rodriguez said, his voice low, a rough whisper against the crackling and popping. He stood beside Miller, his own gaze fixed on the framed face. Said they reminded him of something he couldn't shake. Miller didn't answer, just adjusted the collar of his dress blues, a movement so ingrained it felt automatic. He could still hear the crackle of the radio, the static that swallowed the last coherent words, replaced by a scream that was abruptly cut off. He could still feel the weight of the dust in his mouth, the taste of copper and fear. The houses behind them were hushed, their windows dark squares in the fading light. A few cars sat parked along the street, silent witnesses to this solemn ritual. It felt wrong, this suburban setting for such a fierce, ancient act. A bonfire on Maple Street. It was surreal, like a dream you couldn't quite wake up from. Rodriguez shifted his weight, the leather of his boots creaking. Did he ever talk about it? Before? Miller finally looked at him, his eyes reflecting the fire's glow. He talked about a lot of things, Rodriguez, but not the things that mattered most. He paused, the silence stretching between them, punctuated only by the roar of the flames. He left something behind. Something important. Rodriguez frowned, his brow furrowed in confusion. Important? What do you mean, Sergeant? Miller didn't elaborate. He reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was worn, creased, clearly handled many times. He looked at the portrait again, the solemn expression on his younger self's face seeming to hold a secret. This, Miller said, holding up the paper, was in his pack, tucked away like he didn't want anyone to find it. He hesitated, the firelight dancing in his eyes. It's a map. A map. Rodriguez's eyes widened slightly. Not the kind of map you'd expect, not a battle plan or a route through hostile territory. This was different. The paper was thick, almost like parchment, and the lines drawn on it were intricate, hand-drawn, not printed. It looked old, like something pulled from a forgotten chest. A map to what, Sergeant? Rodriguez asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Miller unfolded the paper carefully, the edges brittle with age. The symbols on it were strange, unlike any he'd seen on a military chart. Circles, triangles, intertwined lines that looked like ancient script. In the center, marked with a bold X, was a place name. A place name that didn't exist on any conventional map of their operational area. I don't know, Miller admitted, his gaze tracing the cryptic markings. But he risked a lot to keep this. He was always meticulous about his gear, but this was hidden. He remembered the chaos of that day, the frantic search for survivors, the grim task of gathering what was left. They'd almost missed his pack, buried beneath rubble. When they found it, the map was tucked deep inside, wrapped in a faded handkerchief. Maybe it's nothing, Rodriguez suggested, though his tone lacked conviction. Maybe it's just something he drew, some kind of stress relief? Miller shook his head. This isn't a doodle, Rodriguez. Look at the detail. And the X. People don't mark X on drawings unless there's something to be found. He paused, his eyes returning to the portrait. He was acting strange in the weeks before. Distracted. Like he had something on his mind. A gust of wind swirled the embers, sending a shower of sparks towards the dark houses. The flames seemed to roar louder, as if acknowledging the weight of their conversation. Do you think it has something to do with that day? Rodriguez asked, his voice heavy with unspoken grief. Miller's jaw tightened. That day. The day the world tilted on its axis. The day the sky turned black. He didn't want to think about it. But the map felt connected. I don't know, Miller repeated, though a new thought was forming in his mind, a cold knot of suspicion tightening in his gut. But I'm going to find out. It's pointing somewhere. And I think it's pointing to something he was trying to protect. He refolded the map, the strange symbols now imprinted on his mind. We're going to find this place, Rodriguez. And we're going to find out what he was hiding. The fire continued to burn, casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to stretch towards the unknown destination marked on the map. The night felt suddenly vast, filled with unanswered questions and a chilling sense of purpose. The next few days were a blur of quiet preparation. Miller, fueled by a mixture of grief and a growing sense of urgency, pored over the map. He compared the strange symbols to every ancient script he could find online, every historical text he could access. Rodriguez, though initially hesitant, became his silent partner, helping with research, gathering supplies, and maintaining a careful silence about their endeavor. They told no one about the map, not their superiors, not even their families. This felt like something deeply personal, something that belonged solely to them and the memory of the man in the portrait. Locating the area on a real-world map was the first challenge. The place name marked by the X was unlike anything they could find in their operational area. It wasn't a town, a village, or a military designation. It sounded older, like a name whispered before history was written. Miller spent hours cross-referencing the hand-drawn features on the map with satellite imagery. A distinctive rock formation, a winding river depicted with flowing lines, a cluster of trees that formed an unnatural pattern. Slowly, painstakingly, they began to piece it together. It wasn't in the heart of the conflict zone, but on its periphery, in a remote, sparsely populated region known for ancient ruins and local legends. "Sergeant, look at this," Rodriguez said one evening, his voice hushed. He pointed to a satellite image on his laptop screen. "This formation, it matches the one on the map. And see this depression in the ground? It's not on any of the surveys." Miller leaned closer, his heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and dread. The depression in the ground, marked subtly on the ancient map, looked like a collapsed structure, hidden beneath centuries of dust and vegetation. "That's it," Miller breathed, a chill running down his spine. "That's the X." Planning the trip was the next hurdle. They couldn't just take leave and wander into a potentially dangerous area. They needed a cover story, a reason to be there. Miller, drawing on his years of experience, concocted a plausible tale of a reconnaissance mission in a bordering region, a story that would get them the necessary clearances without raising suspicion. The journey was long and arduous. They traveled light, blending in as much as possible. The landscape shifted from familiar arid plains to rolling hills covered in scrub brush and ancient, gnarled trees. The air grew thinner, the silence more profound. As they approached the area marked on the map, a strange feeling settled over Miller. It was a sense of being watched, of stepping into a place that held secrets. The rock formation loomed ahead, exactly as depicted on the map, its jagged edges silhouetted against the setting sun. They found the depression in the ground, hidden amongst a tangle of thorny bushes. It was deeper than it looked in the satellite image, a dark maw in the earth. As they stood on the edge, a faint, metallic glint caught Miller's eye from within the shadows. "Down there," he said, pointing. Rodriguez pulled out a flashlight, its beam cutting through the gloom. The glint came from a small, partially buried object. As they carefully cleared away the dirt, they realized it was a metal box, rusted and ancient, with strange symbols etched into its surface, the same symbols from the map. With trembling hands, Miller tried to open the box. It was sealed tight, resisting his efforts. He looked at Rodriguez, a silent question in his eyes. What was inside? What had his younger self been trying to protect? The air around them grew colder, and as the last rays of sun dipped below the horizon, they heard it, a faint, scraping sound from within the buried box, as if something were trying to get out. The scraping intensified, a rhythmic, unsettling noise that resonated in the deepening twilight. It wasn't the sound of metal on metal, but something softer, more organic, like claws on stone. A wave of unease washed over Miller. This wasn't a simple box. This wasn't just a hiding place. Rodriguez, his face pale in the beam of the flashlight, fumbled for his sidearm. "What is that?" he whispered, his voice tight with fear. Miller didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the box, on the strange symbols that seemed to glow faintly in the fading light. He felt a primal instinct screaming at him to run, to leave this place and never look back. But the memory of the man in the portrait, the unwavering gaze of his younger self, held him rooted to the spot. He had to know. He knelt beside the box again, ignoring the frantic scraping. He ran his fingers over the symbols, trying to decipher their meaning, to understand the lock that held the box shut. They felt cold, strangely smooth against his skin. Suddenly, the scraping stopped. An unnerving silence descended, broken only by the rustling of leaves in the wind. Miller and Rodriguez exchanged a tense glance. Had it stopped? Or was it just waiting? Then, with a soft click that seemed to echo in the vast stillness, the box sprung open. They recoiled, expecting some monstrous creature to leap out. But there was nothing. The box was empty. An overwhelming sense of disappointment washed over Miller, quickly followed by confusion. Empty? After all of this, the cryptic map, the hidden journey, the eerie sounds empty? He reached into the box, his hand sweeping across the bottom. It was smooth, cool to the touch. No hidden compartments, no false bottom. Just an empty box. "I don't understand," Rodriguez said, his voice trembling slightly. "What was making that noise?" Miller stood up, his gaze sweeping across the surrounding landscape. The rock formation, the trees, the dark depression in the earth. It felt like a cruel joke. Had they come all this way for nothing? Had the map been a red herring, a desperate act of a man on the edge? He looked back at the box, at the symbols etched into its surface. They weren't just decorative. They were a key. But a key to what? As the last vestiges of light faded, a low hum began to emanate from the ground beneath their feet. It was a deep, resonant sound, like the earth itself was sighing. The symbols on the box pulsed with a faint, ethereal light, mirroring the light that was now beginning to bloom from within the depression in the ground. It wasn't a fire. It wasn't a lamp. It was a pure, incandescent glow, growing stronger by the second. And within that glow, shapes began to form, swirling and coalescing like smoke-given substance. Miller and Rodriguez watched in stunned silence as the shapes resolved into figures, indistinct at first, then clearer. They weren't human. They were tall, slender, with elongated limbs and heads that seemed to lack distinct features. They moved with an unnatural grace, their forms shimmering with the same light that radiated from the earth. The scraping sound returned, not from the box this time, but from the ground, as if something massive was stirring beneath the surface. The figures in the light turned towards the sound, their featureless heads tilting. A chilling realization dawned on Miller. The man in the portrait hadn't been hiding something in the box. He had been hiding the box itself. And the box was a key to something ancient, something powerful, something that had been sleeping beneath the earth. The figures in the light began to drift towards them, their silent movement more terrifying than any roar. The hum from the ground intensified, a vibrating tremor that shook the very air. Miller felt a profound sense of dread, a certainty that they had stumbled upon something they were never meant to find. The man in the portrait hadn't been trying to protect a secret. He had been trying to contain something. And now, with the box open, that containment was broken. The final chapter of their journey was just beginning, and it promised to be far more terrifying than they could have ever imagined. The light from the depression pulsed brighter, casting the figures in stark, unholy relief as they advanced, their silent forms a chilling harbinger of what was to come.